Morning, my friends. Thank you so much for coming. The theme of my reflection this morning is going to be on compassion, and I think that will weave its way through our entire morning together. And I'd like to start that in a very simple way, which would be for us to remind ourselves of how difficult our lives have been. And I understand that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness used to mean, when it was written, meant something really different. It meant living as an engaged member of the community and fulfilling our responsibilities. And it wasn't defined by going to the mall and trying to get the most that I could for me. It had to do with happiness was understood more broadly. Be that as it may, happiness really only comes when we are capable of being with ourselves in our most vulnerable and tender and when we can face what the Buddha called the dukkha of our lives. And there's lots of it. So I'm going to ask you to reflect for just a second on some small, not the biggest one, right? But just something that you have found disappointing. Maybe a sickness, maybe. And then some, on the opposite side, sort of, some way that you are kind to yourself or others. Maybe a small action. Could just be giving someone a parking place. So there's a polarity here. One is, what's been a challenge? And the other one is, one little reflection on your goodness. And if you'd like, this isn't compulsory, of course, if you'd like, to turn to a neighbor and share with them the challenge and the gift that you bring. We'll just do that for 2 or 3 minutes. It's the little icebreaker. And hello to those of you on the net. Well, that had some momentum, didn't it? Anybody here for the first time today? Raise your hand. Well, welcome. I hope it turns out to have been a really worthy thing to do with your precious Sunday morning. Oh yes, we have devices for anyone who has difficulty hearing. These are quite functional, brand new actually, a few months ago. And I guess in that regard I might just take this moment to say that if you came in through the front doors, you'll notice a lot of mud. We now have a very beautiful sewer line, direct connection to the main sewer line. We also have a new water line, which gives us great pressure. And the forms are in for the wheelchair ramp. And it's the wheelchair ramp to the back walkway. And the plans are in place, and we're going to gear it up soon in the next few months to actually get the building wheelchair accessible. So that's a major project that's coming up. And we've been talking about it for a decade, so action is going to happen. So, let's do nothing together for a while. Find a comfortable upright posture. There are a couple of sayings that I've used for a decade or so now, for my own practice. When sitting down, I aspire to love and accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. So meditation isn't about self-improvement or changing ourselves. It's about learning to accept how we are exactly in this moment. And we do there's a lot of ignorance, and there's a lot of avoiding what's true in this moment. And the mental states that are present, and body states, and so on. And if we disapprove of what's true, we're at war with ourselves and reality. So I aspire to love and accept reality as it manifests as me or through me in this moment. And the second, of particular relevance to today, whenever I'm hurting, no matter how I'm hurting, it is my intention to hold myself in sweet compassion. Which means to have the willingness to actually be awake and present with what's true. And frequently what's true is dukkha. The Buddha spoke of it as unsatisfactoriness or suffering, or that which is difficult to bear. And the reason so few people ever undertake meditation, particularly a meditation of unveiling or of being with what is, very simply, is because it requires great courage to encounter this dukkha. So here we are. And as we set off on the inner journey, it's useful to have a home base or primary training object. And the body is marvelous for that. So when you can, bring awareness into the body's contact with the chair or cushion or the floor. Into the life in your hands. The life in your face. And when you do this, it's not about having an image of your face, it's about feeling the actual sensations of life. And now, there is a quintessential sign of life, which we call the breath. And so we can pay attention to the rising and falling of the chest and abdomen, or the sensations at the nostrils. This breathing exists, and awareness of it exists only in the present moment, now. When the Buddha said, try to live in the present moment, he was suggesting that it's here that life occurs. Most human minds are very habituated to living in thoughts and ideas, identified with emotions. We could say we're accustomed to living in a fantasy life, seeing the present moment only dimly through our thoughts. And so here we practice. Whenever you remember, whenever you discover that the mind is off in thinking or lost in an emotion, ever so gently, with no violence, remembering to take up the sensations of breathing and the experience of being here, now. sometimes awareness and the breath come together rather easily, and there's great ease. Other times, it's difficult to even find the breath. The mind gets lost in desire or aversion or restlessness or sleepy dullness or doubt or fear or sadness or anger or jealousy or grief. The breath and the practice of mindfulness of breathing is a strategy for kindling awareness and developing over time the capacity of concentration. When we bring compassion and wisdom into our practice, then when there is disruption or discomfort or anguish or dukkha in its any number of forms, then we can very mindfully and lovingly and respectfully and gratefully put aside the breath as a practice and turn toward that which is unpleasant, that which is anguishing. And in the way we do that, it's very simple and often very difficult. If there's pain in the body, we simply pay intimate attention to that pain. If there's emotional pain, we pay intimate attention to that pain. Pain in the emotional realm, pain in the physical realm that accompanies emotion. It's as though we turn toward that which we have been fleeing and we say, okay, when I'm hurting, however I'm hurting, it is my intention to hold myself in sweet compassion. This takes enormous courage. Sometimes we fear that we'll fall into crying that will never end, or that the pain will completely overwhelm us, that we won't be able to work or function in relationship, or that we'll go crazy somehow. So we do it bit by little bit, one moment at a time. And what is revealed over time with repetition is that it is through accepting the reality of dukkha that we learn how it's caused, and that the cause is in the human mind, non-acceptance. And that the realization of that is the source of all true happiness. The relinquishing of the burden. We start exactly where we are, with a pain in the neck or a pain in the heart, a mind that won't concentrate, a mind that's full of worry, a mind that's doubting. And available to us all the time, when we can find it, is breathing in and breathing out. One of the reasons that we sit still to the best of our ability is that it provides a workshop or a training base for encountering the basic discomfort of the body. Normally we simply shift position, have a snack, do something. we distract from the dukkha of the moment. We do this with our phones and any number of other responsibilities, entertainments. But here now, without the distractions, we actually encounter this body, this mind, one breath at a time. When we go beyond using mindfulness for relaxation, stress management, even basic psychological well-being, we undertake a journey, the journey of humanity, the opening to the reality of human life. The fact that everything changes, nothing lasts. That the sense of self that we are so identified with is unstable. One day confidence, the next day not so confident. One moment happiness, the next moment sadness. This is the ultimate human journey. And it requires great courage. It's the journey that the Buddha followed, and everyone else who's ever awakened. And it's not a journey up, up, and away. It's down, down, and into our common humanity. Each breath, a moment of presence. Each moment of contact with any sense experience is a moment of presence. Be here. Please don't mistake the gong as the end of meditation. How could our practice end if the purpose is to become awake in our lives? Did anyone experience any body pain? Please raise your hand. Take a moment to look around, see if this is So it's not a mistake. Somehow it seems to be common. How about some sadness? Wow, look at that. How about anger? How about wanting? How about sleepy dullness? Sunday morning, what are you doing not in bed resting? How about doubt? It's like, what am I doing here? What is this? Yeah, doubt. Fear. Bliss, delight, tranquility, mindfulness, concentration. It's unstable, isn't it? Some of you have voted 6 or 8 times. Keeps coming up, so I'm going to just mention this. Not only do I want to thank you for coming this morning, but I want to thank you for allowing me to play this role. Because without you, this role doesn't exist. And I discover that in teaching, I learn a lot, obviously. I'm remembering right now with Ruth, a long time ago now, she came to town, and there was a room with maybe 30 people in it, all of them my students. And someone asked her, "Why did you pick Robert to be a teacher?" And she came over and patted my head and said, "Well, it wasn't because of any great spiritual attainment, but but he loves the Dharma, and I know he'll grow into the role." And it's true. And part of the way that happens is getting to play that role. So, so it's great to meet like this. Very, very important for me. Mr. Jim, would you be kind enough to take the helm and do a little mindful movement? Maybe remind them when they get to places to be aware of it, and if there's any resistance.
Okay. So we get in touch with our feet on the floor and our sense of balance. We might, test it a little bit. Move to the side. Watch how the body rearranges itself. If you lift one heel off the floor, the other heel. So every once in a while, people ask me why I do this Qigong stuff. And part of it is that it feels good after being still to allow the body freedom to move, but it's not complete freedom. It's freedom within gestures. And some of these gestures release tension in this body, and I hope it does for you. And some things remind me of how ancient I am and what's aching. So there's some crucial, I'll say cruel reminders and some beneficial effects. So that's part of why I do this. So let's begin by getting our feet under our shoulders and feel how, let's do two things. Let's bring our feet closer together and then reach forward and notice how your body does not like it when you reach out forward and out to the side and the back when you have such a narrow base. Take the other hand and reach out, and there's tension that created by that very small base of operation. If you open to the shoulders, that feet are equal in or lined up with the shoulders, and you do the same movement, there's a much more ease. The body can counterbalance the weight of the arm with the opposite leg, and there's not the same alarm. So that's one of the reasons why we take this pose. It's a very stable foundation, a beginning. So sink and lift, and hopefully this doesn't bring any pain to your body. But there may be some of the movements that will. So we're exploring what's become unhinged and what's flowing easily. So this time we'll lift and then open the arms, embracing a wider world, allowing the breath to fill all the little intricate spaces in the lungs, allowing the chi to move through the body, doing its healing. So sometimes it's smooth, sometimes not. And we raise our hands over our heads and paint a rainbow, expanding awareness into a wider field. Let the eyes glance over to one side and back to the other. We're occupying more space under this rainbow. And then release the arms, sink and cross the wrists. As we come up, we turn the hands and separate the clouds, noticing positive feelings, negative feelings, neutral feelings in the hands, the shoulders, the feet, the knees. And again, opening the world to the side, palms up, pull one hand in, push the other hand out. Almost like swimming in the energy in the room. Drawing the hands back, coming overhead, and sinking. Now we'll lift across and draw one heel off the floor. like the rising sun that has to fade and diminish. Then another day, another rising sun. Then turning, gazing at the moon, noticing if the spine is enjoying this or resisting it. Are the shoulders enjoying this or resisting it? Pressing across. Okay, then reach across and focus on the palm. Let the other palm face towards the earth. Come across to the other side and switch positions. So the upper hand becomes a cloud. The lower hand is the shadow that follows beneath. Then they switch. And how does it feel to focus on the palm of the hand? And then how does it feel to just focus beyond on the opposite wall and just pick out one thing after another, like your restless mind sometimes goes? It's a whole different quality of awareness. Click, 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 little snapshots all across the room. Let's do that again. And then focus on the palm. And the nervous system says, I like this. Okay. Open the stance. Splash in the sea. Notice how the weight shifts back. One leg can be taken forward. While the arms do these large movements that give us this sense of agency. We can have an impact on our world, riding the waves. It's not a large impact, but it feels good. Opening the arms. Now we come back to the center, feel that balance, and then step again, splash in the sea. Maybe this doesn't feel as good. Maybe there's an injury on this side of the body that doesn't like this. So modify it as you need to, but notice what flows, what resists. Riding the waves. opening the arms. And then returning once more to our basic position, feet underneath the shoulders, nicely balanced. Make a fist, let the dragon rise from the seat. Feel the power in the legs as we go from one position to the other. And then up on the toes, we'll soar with the cranes. Then open the stance a bit again and turn the wheel, larger movement. Change direction. And back to our basic balanced pose. We'll lift one arm and one leg like we're bouncing a ball. And then coming to the center, we'll just breathe in, and release. Now, when we come to stillness, what are the predominant sensations in the body? We might do a little scan of the contact with the floor. How deep is the breathing? Is it even or raggedy? In one of Tara Brock's Dharma talks, she asks people to do a little experiment. For the next 5 seconds, don't be aware. So this awareness is our constant companion. Our breath is the constant companion. And this river of sensation is accessible whenever we want it. And then in the area of shameless commerce. Next Saturday, I'm going to be doing this. I invite you all to join me. From 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, we'll be sitting and then moving and sitting and moving and observing the hindrances, the conditioning of the mind when we sit and intend to do nothing. Sometimes guests arrive. So that's what we're going to be doing next Saturday. So February 6th, if you are free, it's a nice little mini retreat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. And greetings to those of you that are joining us out on the internet this morning and later watching later. Kate is not well this morning, so I'm going to do the announcements. March the 5th is a Saturday, and isn't it? Yeah, it's the day-long retreat for the Stewardship Circle. Anyone who is making a regular monthly contribution to PIMC is free to attend, and in our typical style, anyone else can come, but then there's a suggested fee for it. The Stewardship Circle is part of our financial base, and it actually just recently I spoke with someone who said that basically, it feels good to know that you're supporting PIMC even when you're not here. And I'm having, this will sound a little odd, but I'm having a dawning realization of how important this center is and how many lives are affected. There's been more than 20,000 views of the internet feed, and that's not counting the audio talk listening and the thousands of people who've come through here over the years. And I'm privileged to meet with individuals on a one session basis and sometimes for longer, and I see how the Dharma transforms people's lives. So part of speaking about the financial end of things is that that's what keeps the brick and mortar part going. And so I invite you to consider putting some of your financial excess, if there is any, in the Donna basket, or the wooden bowl, or wooden box, I guess. And also to becoming part of the stewardship. I get NPR and PIMC mixed up. We also, and I'm very grateful to the volunteers. Look at these beautiful flowers that magically appeared here today, and the carpet's so beautifully vacuumed, and so much, and the kitchen and the food. There's food today, so please come to the potluck. Even if you didn't know or didn't bring anything, there's always plenty. So, in terms of belonging to PIMC, we don't have a membership. The only way you can belong is by belonging, and one way to do that is to volunteer. And Ethan Benetton is our master of volunteers. He's not here today, but you could talk to me, or you could talk to Kate when she's here. And while I think of it, I have a volunteer need that I'm going to ask for directly, which is I need someone who can sew. Would you, okay, let's talk afterwards. I have a little experiment I want to carry out that has some sewing involved. Here's the cloth itself. Such fun going into a cloth store. Okay. I guess I'm going to ask for another volunteer too. I need someone who would work with me on the internet in terms of the videos. And if that's you, come and talk to me afterwards. Someone who'd really help me be responsible. There's 3 or 4 weeks worth of them that are on Ustream, but are not on YouTube. And YouTube is a much broader, and I just don't get to it. So I need someone who would help me, work with me with that. Okay. The retreat, that. Kate reminded me of 2 things. You know how it is. Yes. Yes. Oh, next week, yes. Her first name is Tori. Next week, sitting here with me will be Tori Lopez, who I met only 3 months ago. And our first meeting was so dynamic and engaging. I think then I said, gosh, you should come and speak to the center. And she's really an expert on prejudice and racism and microaggression, and she teaches workshops on microaggression. And as part of raising our consciousness as a community about this aspect of human consciousness, she's willing to come and talk to us next week. And I think you'll find her engaging and interesting, and I've learned a lot just in the 2 or 3 hours of conversation. Thank you, that's important.
Dharma consultation after.
Dharma consultation. Gregory Malouf sitting there, and Christine Howard to his left are teachers here at PIMC and are now making themselves available for 20-minute, I think there's 3 20-minute conversations which happen here in the interview room. And is there a sign-up place for them? There's a sign-up place outside, inside? Great, okay. And it is remarkable how much a 5-minute, let alone a 20-minute conversation about one's meditation practice what a difference that can make with someone who knows the journey well. So I invite you to take advantage of that. It's also possible to see me for half-hour scheduled appointments. You just need to see Kate or call her during the week. Anything else big that I'm missing? No? Okay. This is a quote attributed to Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, one of the founders of Sufism in the West. Sufism is the mystical side of Islam. In the Sufi tradition, there's a saying, overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. Like the mother of the world who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each of us is part of her heart and therefore endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are called upon to meet it in compassion and equanimity instead of self-pity and despair. The secret, offer your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into love. Overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. Now, isn't that an odd way to think? You were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. Like the mother of the world who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each of us is part of her heart and therefore is endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are called upon to meet it in compassion and equanimity instead of self-pity and despair. The secret, offer your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into love. Very poetic, very hard to do. Compassion is one of what in the Buddhist model are called the 4 Brahma Viharas, the abode of the gods. They are what is left when our selfishness and fearfulness are transcended or burned up. They are, you see them sometimes in their Pali terminology, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. Love, compassion, sympathetic joy or delight, and equanimity. And if we could think of love as that reality in which there is room for everything, there is open-heartedness. Compassion is what happens when love meets suffering, and that is a natural, the Buddha called it trembling of the heart when we encounter suffering, which then has as part of itself an impulse to do something, to be merciful, to act helpfully to reduce the suffering. The third, sympathetic joy or delight, when love meets happiness and success, it wishes for more of it. It doesn't go to jealousy, it goes to, wow, you're having a great success, may that persist. And then equanimity is quite a different beast in a way that I'll speak about another time mostly, but it's the ability to accept things truly as they are. And we can't really become compassionate if we don't simultaneously develop equanimity, because we will fry. And many people reach a point in their meditation where they're becoming more and more sensitized and more open to themselves and their own dukkha, and are learning to accept that. But it becomes overwhelming. It's too much. And that's when there's this movement or infusion of equanimity and wisdom, which I guess this little statement from Pir Vilayat Khan speaks to, which is, this is not just my suffering, this is the suffering of the world. This is human suffering. And it's not a mistake. I just remembered back, it's a long time ago now, 16 years, I ruptured my quadriceps tendon on my right leg and had surgery. And the doctor told me, well, it's been painful up till now, but after surgery is when it will really hurt. And he was right. They pulled the quads down and they put sewing anchors into the top of the patella, and then they tied them. They tied them there, and orthopedic surgery. The medications that I was on were not adequate and were wrong in that I had an allergic reaction, these burning itches, very specific burning itches. But I didn't know that. It didn't occur to me, and the paperwork for it was in the bathroom, and I didn't go to the bathroom itself for several days. So I had this bad drug reaction that I wasn't aware of. And I would wake up around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, having taken as much of the medication as I could. And when I would turn toward the pain and open toward the suffering of the pain, which I had done in India with kidney stone pain successfully, so the suffering went away and there was just pain. When I tried to do that with this, with all the drugs in my system, it didn't work. And so what there was just anguish, just awful pain, and the realization, oh no, it's this many hours till sunrise. And I knew I would be awake, and you can only listen to the BBC News 4 or 5 times before it becomes completely, and Dharma talks were not just. So I developed a practice, or I remembered a practice, that what I did was to lie there and just suffer. And the practice was, so this is suffering humanity. This is how it is. And for so many people, maybe some in this room right now, the dukkha is up. And it's just up. And it's awful. And some of the obvious places would be Syria or North Portland if you're hungry and you're not being able to feed your kids, or the one thing that always comes to mind when I talk about this is that 125,000 people will die on the earth today. Now, right? Probably that's not fast enough. Phones are ringing all over the planet. Your mom died, your dad died, your child died. Your child's been abducted. Not so much here in the States where we make really much more of that than is true, but there's really big stuff happening all the time. So, developing some equanimity is essential at the same time as developing compassion. So I wanted to just say a few things about compassion itself. It's closely aligned with altruistic love. It's the desire to alleviate the suffering of oneself and other beings. It's agape in the Catholic world. It's not so much an action, but an attitude. It's a willingness to be present with pain and to open. We call it opening the heart. Often characterized as giving of oneself without an expectation of return. A fearless gesture of generosity which is free from attachment and personal bias. These actual words are from Matt Flickstein. Compassion is necessarily associated with wisdom and equanimity, or we become part of the suffering that others are experiencing. True compassion can't be swayed, even if the individual who is suffering reacts against us because of their pain and confusion. As with loving kindness, compassion is unlimited in its expression. And Matt lists some very interesting psychological obstacles. Someone is suffering and we offer prepackaged advice. We've previously decided how to be compassionate. And among the yuckiest, most violent advice that is often given is, why are you causing yourself this suffering? Which is a complete misunderstanding of the law of karma. We ignore the objections of the person we're trying to help, and we act as a compassion bulldozer. You will be comforted. We can use compassion to bolster our personal identity. I'm known for compassion. This is who I am. True compassion, we don't even really know we're doing it. We're just there and I had a moment, actually, it just flashed on it. A long time ago, 27 years ago, I was with my then 2.5-year-old daughter at Kanita. And in the warm pools, they're not hot pools, but they're warm. And the temperature was in the 20s maybe, and the wind was blowing. And so it came time to get out, and the wind was really blowing. And so the water wasn't hot like a hot tub, that it's not, it's sort of easy to get out of, but it was just warm. And I got her out, got her wrapped up in a towel, and then wrapped myself up. And I was kind of watching this from outside and realizing, oh, this is a bit different from the plane to put your own mask on first. It's the impulse to protect her from being cold was profound. Compassion. Another way to avoid compassion is to not really connect. It's a risk to those of us that are in the, quote, helping professions, which is a term I don't like very much, because that implies I am going to help you as though I'm not in the same boat as you. Remember, there's a line in one of the early Castaneda books, Don Juan has Carlos look over the people, and this, I forget how it goes, but Carlos is feeling kind of superior because he has this secret knowledge. And Don Juan kind of whacks him over the head with it. You're in the same boat, you're going to die too. We maintain preconceived notions of how we would feel. If we don't feel upset, sad, or the way we think we should feel while being with someone who is suffering, we feel guilty. Due to guilty feelings, we paradoxically begin to resent the people we're trying to help. We foster an attitude of heaviness. It has to be solemn if I'm being compassionate. There's a common misunderstanding of compassion that if someone's sad, for instance, that if we can resonate with them closely enough and find ourselves crying along with them, most probably that's not compassion, but it's sympathy. And it's not much help. What really helps is when there's someone who can hold their boundaries and be present, absolutely contactful, but not getting lost in their own resonance, in their own sadness, which is what can get set off. That was a big learning when I got that one. Time has passed. So today, as I was coming over, I was listening to a talk by Mark Coleman from Spirit Rock, a fellow I've met a few times, very nice fellow, strong connection with environmental issues. It was a talk on tenderness and being tender with ourselves, being tender with the tender parts of ourselves, and which are so strong. Right? There's so much vulnerability and pain in us. So he told a story that I transcribed as some approximation, and I want to share it with you. He didn't know the attribution of it. So it's a story of an elderly woman sitting in a laundromat. And she's sitting in the corner of the laundromat. She always sits in the same spot, and she kind of mumbles to herself. And the young woman comes in, and she's doing her laundry, and she sees her week after week, this old woman over in the corner mumbling, and people kind of avoid her, and they think she's kind of a crazy lady over there. But then she had this idea that maybe she'd go over and sit down beside her. And she did. And when she was sitting there for a little while, the woman handed her a card that said, "You might be wondering why I come here. I lost my son in Vietnam, and this is where he used to do his laundry, and so I come to sit here and to pray for him." So her mumbling was a prayer. The younger woman came at the same time each week, and the older woman was there, and she would sit with her. And they'd sit way past the time when the laundry was finished. One day, the woman who was doing the silent witnessing found the older woman to be absent. She came for several weeks, and she realized that she wasn't coming back. Then one day, there was another woman there at that time, younger and quite well dressed, and she was looking for someone apparently. She approached her and they struck up a conversation, and it turned out this was the daughter of the old lady who had been praying for her son. She asked the daughter to give a note to the woman who had been sitting silently with her. In the beginning, when I came to this place, I came in sorrow. I sat and remembered my boy, and I prayed. People cast glances my way and acted as if I were a bit crazy. I sat in the same place he sat and prayed he would know I love him still and that I was so proud to be his mother. One day you came and sat beside me. As time went by, you continued to come. I said my prayers in your presence. I wondered how you could understand, let alone decipher what I was saying. Somehow, however, you did understand. In this life, I try to be good, to be someone who others can look up to, and I feel that my intentions were always to assist and never to harm anyone. You asked me for nothing, and you gave me something that I will carry with me until I leave this earth. You gave me acceptance and respect and treated me with gentle regard for the person I was. What you may not realize was that coming here became a time I truly looked forward to. I'm going to meet my son very soon, and I wanted to write this while my mind was clear and my daughter Alice could carry my wishes to you. Your presence and acceptance has meant so much to me. No one has ever been so kind without expecting something in return. You gave me the priceless gift of acceptance and time spent with an old lady that others had decided was sick. I will forever be in your debt, and you will forever be in my heart. So what did that younger woman do? She just sat there. And that's a beautiful metaphor for what we do for ourselves in meditation. Not that it's only in sitting, but that we provide for ourselves a quality of presence which is completely non-judgmental, right? Mindfulness is non-judgmental awareness. And I like now to add the term affectionate or warm awareness of exactly what's happening inside us and outside us in successive moments of consciousness. Though, actually, I think I need to modify that, because everything we experience happens inside us. Right? Even the seeing, like my seeing you right now, where does that happen? It happens in here. Everything we experience happens in our consciousness. Doesn't mean you're not out there, but that the subjective experience is the subjective experience. Compassion is not, put it differently. We're born with the capacity of compassion, but unless we are treated compassionately in our first year or two of life, we don't develop it. If you were to take brain scans of the psychopaths and sociopaths of our world, there's a place in the prefrontal cortex that doesn't light up when they see circumstances that would fit compassion. Which means, of course, that they are worthy of our compassion, because it's not through any fault of their own that they are psychopathic and dangerous. Sometimes all we know how to do is lock them up, since we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to do with it when it manifests itself in government or business either. And that's where a lot of our crazy suffering comes from on a big scale. Saddam Hussein saw people killed in the first few years of his life. Ted Kaczynski was a normal boy until he was about 7 months old, his mother reported, and he got some kind of a terrible skin irritation. She took him to the hospital, and he screamed so badly when she left that they, in their ignorance, said, "Please don't come back until he's well." And when he came back, she said, he would go stiff when I held him, and he would never let me hold him again. Now, what we would do today, knowing what we do, would be to swaddle him tight and hold him while he screamed and raged until he gave up. And then we would feed him something sweet. And he would go through the bonding cycle, and he would become capable of feeling again. So he made a decision, pre-verbal decision, the world is not safe. And I would say probably most of us in this room have a part of us that made that same decision through neglect or intrusion. I know that's certainly been true in myself. It's part of the work to overcome. So we learn how to be compassionate, and we learn empathy. And then when we get to be at a certain point in our lives and we undertake spiritual practice, we're developing mindfulness and concentration and the 7 enlightenment factors. It's also possible to intentionally focus on the development of compassion. And we do that by turning toward the hurt, turning toward the suffering. And there's a radically different attitude when we're compassionate toward our suffering than there is if we're practicing to get rid of it. For one thing, the practicing to get rid of it doesn't work. What does work is the opening into whatever the pain is and feeling it as the pain and noticing that the mind is disliking and fighting it and then softening into that somehow, and then the alchemical thing happens and the suffering goes away and the pain persists. But that's the pain of the world. That's our bit of the cosmic pain. How are you doing? How kind are you to yourself when you're in pain? Heard something last night from my wife Jennifer. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm. It's a different perspective on codependency. That many of us, when we were raised with parents who were desperately in need and weren't getting their needs taken care of from outside, from others, then we rose to the occasion to take care of them, because if we took good enough care of them, they might then be able to take care of us, and there'd be some love in our lives, and we'd feel safe. We can persist in that, and we can really forget this person. And I'll ask you this question. Do you have an hour a day in which you attend to your own inner life? Do you have 10 minutes a day? If not, why not? Because you're the person responsible for your happiness. And you can take care of as many people as you want. And if you don't take care of this one, you'll never really be happy. It's impossible. And also, when we're so busy taking care of others, we often aren't that compassionate, because how can we be compassionate when our own needs and hurts are screaming so loudly? So coming back to oneself. It's funny, touching the heart. Are you worthy of taking care of? Really? Are you really worthy of spending time with, just for yourself? Now, one of the impediments to that is when we do turn toward ourselves, and many people, most people, maybe everyone, when they turn toward doing a meditation practice of this kind, with some frequency, we discover that there's more dukkha than we ever thought. Right? We've been hurting unconsciously, and then we stop the distractions and the addictions, or we diminish them, and we start feeling what's really going on, and there's it's like, this can't be true. Many people, I've introduced thousands of people to meditation over the years, and people start and then they disappear, and then they come back a year later or 5 years later or whatever. But a common experience is that there's the discovery that the mind is really out of control. Not just a little, but it's really quite nutty. And that there's more pain than one dreamed, and so therefore this must be the wrong meditation. Or there's something so wrong with me, I can't meditate. When in fact, and that's why these 20-minute conversations can be so helpful. In fact, so often what a Dharma teacher does is to say, yep, that's how it is. You're not having a mistaken perception. I know that state. So how do we practice being so kindly present with ourselves? Sit down, stop, breathe. But we're not paying attention to the breath with the intention to get rid of things. That's a very common misunderstanding. We're using the breath for stability so that we then have the capacity to turn with this big, I think of it sometimes as like those giant dishes that look up at the stars. We turn toward this and, oh, here's this subtle sadness. What is that? How can I feel that? Now, not to get stuck on one pole, the opening to this aspect of our being is also what opens us to joy and delight and vibrancy and the capacity to love and play. And because if we tamp ourselves down, we tamp ourselves down. People come back to life when they meditate. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful thing. So I want to read another little story. I have time for it. I thought it would be better on paper, but it's kind of dark. I think I'll pull it up on here. At her feet. Before I launch into this, please take a moment and feel into yourself. Where is it that you need compassion? One way to find that is to look at where does the voice say you're wrong, or that's disgusting, or if you were a better human being, you wouldn't have this addiction or this compulsion, or that's where we turn. That which is unacceptable to us. And then if we were to go back to those two phrases, I aspire to love and accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. Imagine loving and accepting ourselves in ways nobody else ever has. It's one of the reasons we need community. And in my experience, my teachers and therapists have been extremely helpful too, in that they were able to teach me that I was lovable by loving me. And also my relationship partners, as fraught and challenging as intimate relationship is. And my friends have loved me when I have felt unlovable, when I've been certain. So this is this little story by a woman named Saul. I don't know what she's doing now. This is a long time ago. 2005, it was in... equipped with a backpack and a blog, Saul has spent the last 4 years traversing 6 continents and over 40 countries in hot pursuit of the meaning of life. She says she won't stop till she understands her place in the universe, and thus, with an eternal quest, the perpetual pilgrim treads on. And this takes place in Varanasi, India, at one of Mother Teresa's homes for the destitute. I walk into the house thinking I have offered to volunteer my time and hands, but what I quickly learn is that my humility and touch, that it is my humility and touch that outstretched arms reach out to receive. I manage my way through the maze of cots in the dimly lit room. Dark and slim bodies dangle, rock, cry, bang, mumble, laugh, smile, scream, sing, and sway, their definitions merging into the shadows themselves. This is a house for the destitute, and the haziness of my 8th grade vocabulary class suddenly gains sharp clarity as I find myself confronted with a room full of example forms. Destitute, lacking all money, resources, and possessions necessary for subsistence. The cots and bodies are all only a few feet off the ground, and as I make my way through the room, I feel too tall, too strong, too tanned, too fed, too foreign, too full, too different, and too big. Who am I, and what place do I really think I have here? A bony arm reaches out and tugs on my apron. The small bundle of bare life turns desperate eyes up to me and pleads in Hindi for a favor that I do not have the language to understand. There is an impression in the bed that indicates that this body has spent a lifetime depressing the form of its meager shape into it. She reaches out a frail hand to me. I shy away and struggle with hand signals to explain to her that I don't understand, that I do not speak her language, that I don't know what she wants or needs, that I can't give her what she wants, and then I scan the room desperately for one of the sisters to save me. But with another low groan of demand, both my hand and my attention are grabbed, and she pulls me down. Without any other option, I squat down onto the cold floor, and for the first time, I really look at her. Her kind eyes soften my stiff hand as my disinclination dissolves and I allow myself to settle into her smiling eyes. I begin to wonder what it was that I was so afraid that I would see in her eyes. Finally, having hurtled the last of my hesitations, I sigh my relief, and she, satisfied with finally assuming my attention, smiles. My anxiousness melts, and my hand warms as I sink into this comfortable place at her feet. And as I do so, I notice with sudden relief how much more comfortable it is down here, looking up into her eyes, offering myself not from above, but from below. My eyes take rest in her face, having stopped searching, stopped seeking, stopped speaking. My shoulders and the worries of the world they support drop into the shadows around us, and in the silence and space of the moment, she speaks to me, not in Hindi and not in English, but in the universal language of shared humanity. And suddenly, I get it. I put my other hand on top of the one she has put on mine, and hands embraced reflect all the warmth in my heart back at her. How simple, how easy, how obvious. How could I be so silly as to think that I was not familiar with the alphabet of this universal language? Did I not speak this language even through the wordless years of my infancy? Is this not the language that still peacefully fills the silence when the clutter and clumsiness of idle and formal conversations inevitably fall away and finally fall mute? The shyness of my hands step aside from the arrogance they had hidden behind, and I cup both her hands in mine and gently massage into them my new understanding of our shared being. To be touched, to be recognized, to be loved, are these not my own needs? Are they not the needs of every human being? And did I really think her above receiving them, or me below giving them? Recognition is all she asks of me. Recognition of our similarity, recognition of our shared humanity, recognition of not only her humility, which is physically obvious, but of mine, which also rests hidden in a dark corner, but under the heavy cover of good health, youth, and opportunity. To look into my eyes and see herself reflected, to look into her eyes and see myself reflected, and to know that aside from a shade of skin color and a seed of sickness, absolutely nothing differentiates these two images. Stripped of our identities and both humbled to the floor in each other's eyes, we find our shared existence. And if I had one wish in the world, it would be that every single person on the planet would have the opportunity to sit on this floor, at the foot of this woman, to look into these eyes and to find shared humanity held in these hands. The dark hand gently releases and pats my hand a silent thank you. I smile. I stand up. And I feel smaller. So we don't have to go to India. we don't even have to find someone else to practice with, though if we had time, which we don't, I would invite those of you who wish to pair up with someone and do a guided meditation of seeing this person and imagining them as a child, and imagining how difficult their life has been. As you sit there and someone is looking at you and you're reflecting on your life, and then again bringing to the present and then to the future, and then imagining this person dying. And then, of course, the same for ourselves. When we take this reality of dukkha out of the closet and look straight toward it and stay present, boom. It's also, I guess it's important also, we say opening the heart. What does that mean? For some people, there actually is an experience in the heart chakra, but that's not the essence of it. It isn't some emotion. None of the Brahma Vihara, well, they're emotion of a sort, but compassion is the heart's natural trembling when faced with suffering. Now again, we're using a physical vocabulary. It's the intention or willingness to actually be present. So, the invitation is to be present with ourselves. Exactly as we are. I mean, that's a pretty revolutionary thought, isn't it? We're never going to get it all together. Our personalities are never going to get all smoothed out, and it doesn't happen that way. What we do is grow something bigger and bigger and bigger that can love and accept our personality, and set limits on it sometimes. It's like, no, you are not to send that email. Or when the self-talk is pretty nasty toward the self, it's like, enough of that. We're going to rein that in. And developing a different vocabulary of allowing and loving this person as she is, as he is. So please, in this moment, turn toward wherever it is that you're hurting at present. Particularly wherever you're suffering. I guess one way to do that would be to make a little list of the things that are wrong in your life, the things that are just not working. The things that should be different, but aren't. And then say yes to them. Say yes, they really exist, and you're big enough, conscious enough, loving enough to allow them to exist. Whew, what a relief to put down the fight. And then to see the gift that they are, how they are resulting in your awakening. And just before the kids come in, I invite you to look around the room and see yourself in your many forms with a thought of compassion, knowing that everyone in this room really has a lot of dukkha that they work with. Just to the degree it's comfortable, just take a moment to There's a great truth, which is that anyone who looks as though they've got it all together doesn't. All right. The bucking Broncos are in the chute. Come on in. Thank you to those of us that joined us on the net. In the choir. Excuse me, thank you. Some sing low. Just a foot. Thanks. Okay, watch your hair.
I'm going to be the singer.
Oh, you're going to be the singer. Okay, let's not burn your hair up ahead of time. So please find a hand to hold or a back to touch or a foot. Can I have your hand, sweetie? There we go. So, remembering that these hands and feet are one of a kind ever on the planet. And give them a little squeeze. Some of them are real young, just setting off on their journey, and others of us are much older. But we all share this common humanity. We're all making our way through quite a journey. So why not train our minds to be kind and to love each other? So feeling the hand on your left,
I'm going to be the singer.
feel your hand on his left, and think a kind thought, a loving thought, a compassionate thought. And then to the person on your right, wishing them well. It's quite fun to go through the world and just wish people well, and it interrupts the mind of judgment. And so to everyone in this room, and everyone who's ever been in this room since 1930 when it was built, to our friends and families, and to those people who find themselves in positions of leadership, to the poorest of the poor, please let us remember our interconnection, the fact that we are all truly one living presence. And so, I think there's some excitement about doing the song. May all beings be. Now, shall we practice 10 seconds of patience? I want it, I want it, I want it, but it's not here yet. Patience, isn't it hard? Impatience is difficult. Here it comes, the moment of reason. All right. No. You're sharing. Hang on. Where's Maya? Okay. All right. Whenever you're ready, girls, may all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. There we go. Well. It's a truth in the spiritual journey that you have to become somebody before you can become nobody. So, we're going to do the usual count, and everyone in the room gets to blow out the candle. And again, we're being patient. 1, 2, 3, blow. Yay, we did it. So thank you, dear friends. Please do join us for some food and companionship. And
I did it!
you did it. Yay, look at that. Yay, you did it. Yay. What a success. You did it great. Thank you.
Hey, what is this?
That's my microphone, yeah.
Yeah, like that is the microphone.
It's true. There's 2 microphones here. All right, and that's a microphone.